Coogs house. The Houston Cougars find themselves number one in the AP poll after Purdue slipped last weekend, and now Kelvin Sampson and company hope to not fall victim to the same exact problem in a trap game Wednesday night.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougars, a podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day and making the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. If you want to join the conversation and you don't know what to say, with Oakland being named Oakland but in Michigan, which is not the famous Oakland of California, tell us in the comments down below, what is your favorite city that it kind of operates in two places? Is it Paris, Texas? Is it something along those lines? Today's show is brought to you by a couple different folks we'll talk with you about later. But I got too much to get into as Houston looks to not get trapped on Wednesday night with the Oakland Golden Grizzlies. I want to talk about how this could be a trap game, who Oakland is in the second segment, and then honestly, we'll get back into some recruiting woes for the Coogs in the third and final segment as well. I guess I want to say woes pretty low there, but we'll break all that down when we get there. All right. I said in the open, I'll say it again. This game is dangerous for Houston. It's dangerous for everyone, evidently. Oakland, from outside Detroit, Michigan, plays in the Horizon League. They will be the first team to play back-to-back number one of the AP poll teams, where all three teams involved, both number one teams and the team playing them, are all from three different conferences. Oklahoma did this back in 1990, but they played Missouri and Kansas, and all three were in the Big Eight conference at the time. Then you had to play them. We've also seen sometimes where a team will play a number one team out of conference, but then play the new number one team in their conference. And so you can't always, the conference thing changes this. With all three teams being in different conferences is very, very unique, and Oakland is taking it on. Oakland has beaten Houston the only time they've ever played, way back in 2011. But Coach Kampe is still there. He's been there back then as well, and he's been there since 1984. And it's a program that he's built over a long period of time. This program moved up to Division I in 1990 after the 1997 season, the transition year, and the 1998-9 season was their first year in Division I. They played in the tournament 4 times. They got the round of 32, though, as recently as 2024. And for what it's worth, I think this is a program that looks like it's in a pretty strong spot if we're being completely transparent about things. Look, this year's Oakland team has played 2 games so far. They got, honestly, somewhat blown out by Michigan. It was close in the first half, not so much in the second half, and the opening night of the season. They then went down and got beat by Purdue. But in that Purdue game, Oakland had leads, plural, at different points of the second half. And frankly, really put Purdue in a bind in a couple spots. Braden Smith had to put on his Superman cape and save the day for Purdue in that basketball game. Now, Purdue was not at full strength. I'm not trying to say that, they were undeserved of being a top team, whatever. I am saying, though, that if you are not on your A game, this Oakland team can clearly beat you. And Houston's got its own banged up issues. Khalifa Sacco has been dealing with something. Isaiah Harwell has been cleared and sounds like he's good to go, but we're not sure Cordell Jefferson is. And they're still finding a rotation in this young season with a new season, young program, etc. That could weigh into this at some point, right? If you don't have Cordell Jefferson, you need more point guard player. Those kinds of things make a difference. I think Isaiah Harwell being good goes into a good thing because I think he'll get plenty of opportunity to get that jump shot back. We know that he's so smooth with as a highly touted high school prospect. But they're going to need their guys in this game. And for what it's worth, on Oakland plays UCF on Monday after this game. And I completely expect Oakland to win that game. Frankly, Oakland, if Houston beats Oakland like they're supposed to, and Houston is a more than 30-point favorite in this one on FanDuel, if Houston beats Oakland like they're supposed to, Oakland will be 0-3. I don't see them being a more than 7-loss team. This is a team that could legitimately be a 13, 14, 15 seed in the NCAA tournament. They made it to the round of 32 back in 2024. And based on how things break out and what other uh, upsets you see, I mean, we've seen 13 seeds in the Sweet 16 before. If things break their way, it doesn't take a whole lot of chaos. It takes some chaos, but not like a whole lot of chaos for that to happen. Houston's managed to have a pretty stout schedule if you think of things as tournament teams thus far, and Oakland is no different in that. The other aspect of this that makes it a trap game for Houston is that it fits squarely between last weekend in warming up to basketball and all that, and playing Auburn and Birmingham next week. Now, Sunday, Houston heads to Birmingham to play the Auburn Tigers that like to have Eagles in their whatever that's all about. Regardless, Auburn is one of Houston's only couple of losses last season. It was early in the year, and Houston's looking to avenge that loss. It's a big game. It's two top 20 teams, and admittedly, before the coaching change in Auburn, it was two top 10 teams. The game's on ESPN. It's in the prime slot on a Sunday window. Auburn brought back the Hod Pettiford, who had his coming out party against Houston a year ago, and a new point guard and a new roster and all that. Houston brings back Usanne, who's certainly trying to clear his name up against Pettiford and use that as a piece of video evidence he's an NBA point guard. I think he still would have got drafted last year, but he opted to come back to Houston. This is the kind of game you opt to come back to Houston to play in with Auburn on Sunday. Keyshawn Hall is killing it for them. Keyshawn Hall did not have a particularly great scoring night for UCF last year against Houston, but he did lead UCF in a game that UCF almost beat Houston last year. So you're going to get his best punch and effort as well. All of that is Sunday. And Oakland sits here squarely between now and then. And look, I know the coaching staff is not thinking about Auburn until Thursday. They're going to focus on Oakland before Thursday. I know that the program will say top to bottom that's exactly what they're doing. But Oakland is the kind of team that if you were just saying it and not actually doing it, they're going to expose you. They're really, really tough. They play a particularly unique brand of basketball that I want to talk about in the second segment. And they're really, really disciplined and good at it, right? Now, they're not particularly deep. They're not particularly deep. And frankly, mano a mano, I don't think I'd take any one of their guys over any one of Houston's guys. It's not like they have some diamond in the rough prospect that we're going to go swoop in and it's going to be a big transfer portal, a diamond come March or April. I don't think there's anyone quite like that for them. They're just really good at what they do. And if you are not focused on what they do, they're going to beat you. And again, I think they beat UCF on Monday. It's a Power 4 win for them. Their only other power conference game between UCF and conference play is Michigan State. I could see them sneaking up on a Michigan State based on school size and athletic program size and all that. I kind of feel like Michigan State's really good, so I'm not going to pick them to beat that one. I could see a world where it happens, but suddenly that's there. If Houston wins, that would be Oakland's fourth loss. And again, I don't think they're losing more than a game or two in conference. They're really, really strong. We'll get into just how strong they are in 1 second as we look more specifically at the Oakland roster. Before we get to that, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Supply House. Because when the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving for a Supply House. Order AC parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times help keep you from punting on projects, while industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Look, I told you we got a home a little over a year ago. Y'all didn't tell me when I got this house that there's always last minute projects you got to fix, and you don't realize it till they really have to get fixed very, very quickly. Supply House, it delivers in 24 hours. It is the best thing to get those things fixed with. Join the free Trademaster program. I'm not a handyman myself, but Trademaster program helps me figure things out. You can join that program today and score serious perks, priority shipping, lower prices, dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com, sign up for free, and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com, real people and real service. Park Rangers Locked on Coogs here, part of Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network in the world. And I think Houston's in a real trap gaming kind of spot with Oakland here. And I think it's worth mentioning like what that program and team looks like, because it's easy to see their scores and box scores on paper. But honestly, they got 5 guys averaging double figures. And even with the crazy difficult start of the schedule, those guys are doing a pretty efficient look at that double figures, right? They got 3 different guys playing 35 or more minutes a game. Zaire Wells, Tuber Navalora, and Brody Robinson. Now, only 7 guys have double-digit minutes. The starters play between 28 and 36 minutes per game. They got 2 bench guys playing in the low teens, and that's the rotation. That's who they play in these couple tough games throughout the year. They're trying to win games. Those are the 7 guys they're playing, and so they're not very deep. And I wonder if you can run them at the gym. That feels like what happened against Michigan, if I'm being really honest, right? Zaire Wells is their leading scorer. He's a long 6'6". I'd imagine a 6'8", 6'9" wingspan, long-armed kind of guy. He's averaging 17.5 points and 9 rebounds. He's listed as a forward. He plays the back line of their zone. Defensively, they do a lot of different stuff, but it's primarily out of the zone. Zaire Wells is their tough scorer, though. He is not a very efficient three-point shooter, but he's not like terrible. He's 26%, right? So you got to cover him, but like I wouldn't worry about him beating you out there necessarily unless it's a crazy good day. Tuberu Navalora is a stronger 6'6". I think like more like a traditional forward build, big, strong through the chest and shoulders. He's averaging 14.5 points per game, and he's also their best rebounder of the 2 guys here. He's a pretty strong guy inside as well. And then Brody Robinson, who I've talked about a little bit this week. Brody is an undersized point guard. He is listed 5'10". I bet he's closer to 5'8". No shade on it. The dude plays with like he's covering Braden Smith. He's covering guys that are 6'4" at Michigan. He's doing everything. He shoots over 38% from 3 this season. And while he had a bad shooting game against Purdue, he's over 39% from 3 on his career. He's a really good shooter off the dribble and off the catch. You got to get into his face. He's giving you 11 points and 4.5 assists per game. I mentioned he is a Houstonian kid, and a quick aside here, he went to Houston Christian High School at a great spot in that program, great private school program in Houston. He's now in his 4th school in 4 years. Has been constantly transferring around, trying to find the right fit and moving up in the world. This is probably the best program he's played for. He went to UT Arlington and Chattanooga and a junior college and da-da-da. But he's peaking at the right time as far as where he's playing in his career. Now, full disclosure, as a point guard, they run a zone, so he wasn't directly responsible for covering Braden Smith. But Braden Smith did kind of get loose on him for 20 points, 9 assists, and 7 rebounds. And so the size discrepancy there does play a role in how Robinson and other members of Oakland are able to guard folks. But Oakland's solution all year long has been to go zone. They really zoned Michigan the whole game, got shot out of the gym, and lined up in it again against Purdue. And the Purdue game was a much closer game. Oakland had leads in the second half, able to make shots from deep themselves to kind of keep themselves in it. And, Purdue got a lead, got it up to 10 points by busting the zone with their own ball pressure and getting on transition, not letting the zone set up. And they've got a great point guard. I think Houston's got a great point guard. I think Houston's got a great defense. They can kind of replicate a lot of those same things. I imagine traps and ball pressure on Brody and other guards at Oakland are going to be important for Houston to get active in this game. But I would point out the biggest thing Houston's got to do to win this game based on who Oakland is shoot the 3 ball well. In the two games they've played against, again, admittedly top teams, they're giving up almost 46% shooting from behind the arc, and that's largely because they're basing everything out of zone and giving up threes and willing to live by the three, die by the three defensively, so to speak. They don't want to give up anything inside. They don't want you to beat them inside. I'm sure JoJo will have his moments. I'm sure Chris Sinak will have his moments. But really, this is a game where, like, if you can find the right ways to beat it and you can scheme it right, getting Emmanuel open against his zone is going to be huge. Getting Milos open against his zone is going to be huge, right? Getting Isaiah Harwell open against his zone is going to be huge because those guys are shooters and they give up a lot of open shots because the zone is just that's where the weakness is. Every defense has a weakness. That's where zone's weakness is. And over 50% of the shots that Oakland gives up are from behind the arc. And it makes you feel like it's almost intentional, right? They're protecting the rim so much and they're doing it with a lack of true size. They're giving up those outside shots, right? And because of that, they like don't give up many free throws because people aren't driving on them because they're shooting threes, right? And Purdue didn't have nearly as good a shooting day on it as Michigan did, and that game was much closer. If Houston does not shoot the three ball well, this game will also be close because they're not going to give you other things. You're going to have to get out in transition to get that kind of stuff. And that can be a death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing, or a thing you got to kind of work to over the course of a game. I imagine Houston has a better shooting day for a couple reasons. One, the shots are better quality, I think, in this one than we're against Towson. Towson's a pretty good perimeter defensive team and didn't zone like this by any stretch. It also feels like the kind of thing where you just don't have many bad shooting days in a row in this Houston program. After a couple off nights, you pick one back up and get back on track. I also think that, frankly, it's very obvious when you watch Oakland that that's what they're going to do. So I'm sure they've worked on things to open up certain shooters in certain spots throughout the week. I also think what you're going to see is in the zone, contrary to popular belief, and I say popular because of what you always hear, but I don't think it's right. It is actually really easy to rebound offensively against the zone to me. When you get the zone out of rotation and launch a jump shot from deep, your offensive guys know where the rim is, know where the ball is. Their defensive guys are in a zone. They don't necessarily know where the offensive players are quite as well. And especially this early in the season when you don't have as much teach tape or necessarily have like favorite sets they're running a zone or whatever, right? I think the advantage in rebounding actually shifts more towards the offense given a zone team. Now, that's more about what odds are, not what happens on Saturday on a Wednesday. I'm sorry, but what I think happens on Wednesday is the way Houston rebounds the ball already. With that, will compound to create a situation where Houston does really, really well rebounding the ball, right? And so I would imagine you see Houston get some more what they call dagger threes within the program, where the offensive rebound happens and they have calls and you have an immediate kick out, one touch, 3-point shot goes right back up because the defense is so off kilter they can't get set. You see Emmanuel Sharp take advantage of this a lot, Miles Usanne take advantage of this a lot, and the program keeps track of how many of these they hit in a game. Right, this is a big deal for the pro. This is what they do. They like the dagger threes in the program, and I think that this zone will give up those in multitudes, right? A lot of ways to get to that spot. I also think that, frankly, part of Houston's rebounding advantage in that way will be because they have a much more athletic front court. On the other side of the floor, you see it show up a lot too, but Oakland is not what I would call quick or explosive in the front court. Frankly, you see a lot of ball fakes and getting guys in the air and trying to be crafty and things like that. And they're good at those things. They did it to Purdue and kept that game close for a long time. Um, and frankly, against Houston, what worries me more is like, does JoJo Tucker get in foul trouble biting on those things, right? Does Chris Sinak, as a freshman, get in foul trouble biting on those things, right? But that is also to make up for lacking their own athleticism. And if Houston can play disciplined and keep up with that, they're so much more athletic. I think that they'll ultimately went out on that as well. Look, this is a 30.5-point spread. I'm not trying to make this out to be Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Like, Houston should win this game. But Oakland's good. And frankly, Oakland's going to beat a Power 4 team this season and I think make some noise in the tournament. And when you look at a team that like wins a round of 64 game in the tournament that no one had them wins, or you look at it like 13 seed that got to the Sweet 16, like how do they get here? If you look early in their season, they're usually playing these close games against Purdue and Houston and whatever, where you're always like, oh, I should have known that was going to happen, because this is where those kinds of qualities show up early in the year to then show up again in March. But it is early in the year, and so early it's actually the early part of the signing period. I want to talk about Houston basketball recruiting while we're on the basketball program, because people got some thoughts on it that I don't know that I completely agree with. So I want to get into that one second. But first, today's show is brought to you by our buddies for FanDuel. Best place to get on the action because the NBA is back. College basketball is back. College football still going. NFL still going. Hockey, they tell me that thing's happening too. And there's no better place to get on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Because even if you miss the start of the game, want to ride the hot hand, whatever, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score the next basket to that fourth quarter comeback and everything in between. You can combine live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout at the end. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that like late game push or your team's already up by a bunch of points. You want to find ways to make it more exciting either way. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Head to FanDuel.com, sign up today, play a game with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Park Rangers locked on Coogs here, a proud member of the number one sports podcast network in the world, Locked On Podcast Network. And Houston recruiting, people felt disappointed because, interestingly, there's a large number of people, I should say, that felt, not everyone felt disappointed when Abdullah Ahmed, after narrowing his choices down to BYU and Houston, ultimately chose BYU after visiting Provo last weekend. If you don't remember, Ahmed is the G League big man transferring back to college basketball. Transferring back is maybe not the best phrase, right? In the way the landscape is ever shifting, and G League guys are coming back to college basketball. And people saw that miss and wanted to kind of run with it. I saw people acting like this was the world. How do we not get this guy? I feel like we had people talk about guaranteed. I tried not to guarantee he was coming to Houston on Tuesday's episode. Frankly, I'd heard people thought they had him, thought they felt pretty good about it, but they also didn't have the last word. BYU had him on campus last. Those things always change. Yes, he's been a pro athlete in the G League for a couple of years, but he's still a young kid. Like, people change their minds, situations change. And honestly, I think part of it came down to wanting to jump to money. It's BYU, it's money, it's money, it's money, it's money. That's fine. I'm sure money is always involved a little bit. But Houston's been really competitive in terms of comparing their basketball NIL budgets and basketball programs' financial situation to other basketball programs. They've been competitive enough to where the basketball wins out. I think the basketball actually here's part of the problem. And that's really more because Abdullah Ahmed plays really good drop coverage at the point of attack and the ball screen pick and roll, right? And he's good at it. I mean, 3 blocks every 18 minutes, kind of good at it. Houston doesn't really do that with their bigs. Now, they need that kind of active around the rim for protection. That's what Houston does do. But in the ball screen pick and roll, they want the guy up at the level, if not higher on the hedge, to push the ball backwards, right? You see JoJo Tugler as an athlete. You saw Jawan Roberts as an athlete. You saw Reggie Chaney. You saw Josh Carlton. You saw Jarris Walker as a power forward. These guys that are getting out and pushing the ball away from the rim in ball screen and roll actions, right? Ahmed would have trouble with that. I made the argument that was the only real, it's a big flaw, but the only real flaw in his fit with Houston. And that ultimately, if he wanted to get better at that before going back pro, it might have made sense to come to Houston to work on that. However, BYU drops their guys a lot. BYU plays more of a traditional drop coverage, akin to like what Rudy Gobert would do for the Utah Jazz. Not just because BYU and the Jazz are both in Utah, but that's kind of the best version of what that could look like, right? Kada, their big fella up there at BYU, who had trouble with Delaware on Tuesday night. I digress. Kada is their big guy, and he does this kind of stuff really well. And I think that's kind of the showing off what he already does well. Might have been more the mode he wanted to go to. All things even, I think that's more what I want to go to. People comparing this and make this about recruiting though for Houston was interesting because they wanted to act like, with signing day happening on, I guess, the early part of the signing period opened up this week, and Houston has no verbal commits in the class of 2026 for men's basketball, and that's uncomfortable for a lot of people. It's like, okay, who's signing? Who's writing their name down on paper? When is this happening? When is this happening? When is this happening? Right? People are freaking out a little bit, I think, about that, rightly or wrongly. And I'm here to tell you that they think they've got a couple guys right within the program committed, and frankly, if you've been following for a while, it's names we mentioned before, right? They feel pretty good about some pretty good kids coming in. I also would point out that Houston's in an interesting space now where, honestly, the caliber of athletes they're recruiting are going to continue to be making the picks of where they're going later and later and later because they are highly selective. They want to see a lot more about the program because these are the kind of kids that are going to come in and make an immediate impact, right? Sampson doesn't like playing freshmen right away, but you'll notice he's playing them a lot right away right now. And you'll notice that while Mercy didn't get to play a whole lot last year, in the last 5 years, that feels more like the outlier than the opposite, right? Jarris, Emmanuel, and Terrence all played a lot as freshmen, right? And that's kind of more how the things have gone. And so I say all of that to say that when Houston gets commitments this week and in the early part of next week, they're pretty strong guys, pretty big time commitments, and that I think we have to get used to as Houston fans. With Houston being a program that's now in this space, you're going to find out later and later in the year who's coming and who's not. Because kids at this level of recruiting want to go to a program that they feel like they're going to get on the floor in, they're going to develop for the next level in, and there's really a spot for. It's not about that there's going to be a spot for me in 2 or 3 years, right? It's not going to be, I want a good college back. It's, can I get to the league from what you're doing? And that might take me 2 years, but can I start that process quickly, right? That's kind of the guys they're looking at now. And I don't know that any of the guys looking at in the 2026 class are one and dones. I do think they got a lot of stars next to their names, right? And so they've got guys that are pretty firmly, they feel like in their camp. And I think that you're going to see a pretty strong class get thrown together over the course of the next 10 days. And there'll be a couple names that dangle all the way out until March or April because they want to wait to see who goes pro, right? And so, obviously, as more commits happen, we'll be here to break down each and every day at Locked On Coogs, primarily Locked On Podcast Network. But ultimately, I think that losing out on a recruit to BYU, who's got a big-time basketball program brewing, and they're in the top 10 right now, right, is not this, indictment on anything. Frankly, Houston's made the Final Four to guys that had no stars next to their name coming out of high school. It's not really about that. Do I think there'll be a lot of new faces on the roster next year? Yeah. That's the reality of it. Between guys finishing up their eligibility, going pro, etc., you're going to have a decent amount of new faces on the roster next year. But you also have faces around that were their own 4-star prospects in high school that have been in the program for a couple of years that are going to take the reins some. And that combination that Sampson always walks is part of the reason this program is so strong. And I think that people need to hold their horses, pump the brakes, or insert your favorite metaphor here for the idea that Houston's got a problem in the 2026 class because they have no commitment as of yet. That's kind of ridiculous, given where they're at in the national recruiting landscape. That's kind of ridiculous. Now, We'll be ready to talk all of that and more as kids commit. We'll also talk about this game live. The Oakland and Houston game will go live after the game is over on Wednesday night. So you want to hit subscribe and then hit the bell so you know when we are going live. Locked on Coogs is primarily Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.